team in Indiana. The primary now guaranteed to matter in the Hoosier state. So what does that mean for Indiana? And what should we expect over the next 6 weeks? Plus, cracking down on drugs, a Sunday morning exclusive with the man in charge of the Indiana State Police.
From RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
And thank you so much for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. You are always welcome to join our conversation or debate with us on Twitter. You'll find us at Indy This Week. We begin talking the presidential primaries, the road to the White House now coming through Indiana. That moment coming Tuesday night when John Kasich won his home state of Ohio, essentially guaranteeing that Indiana's May 3rd primary will now matter in the race. And in all likelihood, that blocks Donald Trump from getting the required number of delegates needed for the nomination before the Republican convention in Cleveland.
We've got one more trip around Ohio this coming fall where we will beat Hillary Clinton and I will become the President of the United States. Thank you all very much, and God bless you.
So that all leads to Indiana, one of just 20 states left to hold a vote for the Republican nomination. The May 3rd contest has 57 delegates up for grabs. Only 4 remaining states have more. And Indiana is winner-take-all, meaning that our race here could grab plenty of national attention. I sat down with John Kasich's Indiana Finance Chair, John Williams.
It's down to 3. What do you think Kasich's chances are from this point on?
I think his chances are really good. I think we've got a significant amount of momentum coming out of Tuesday's win in the Ohio primary. I think that the delegate map sets up very well for Governor Kasich going this point forward, certainly more than it does for Senator Cruz. So I think you're going to see Governor Kasich be competitive out west in states like Utah, Washington, competitive in states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Of course, he grew up in blue-collar McKees Rock, where his dad carried the mail, and he's going to be competitive right here in Indiana as well in the May 3rd primary. I think his brand of common sense conservatism really resonates well with Hoosier Republicans. It's interesting. I spent a lot of time talking to my fellow Republicans, especially over the last several months, and it's become apparent to me that I think all of us wish that we were talking about Mitch Daniels at this point. But I think when folks look at Governor Kasich's record, what he's done in Washington on the budget, what he's done in Ohio, I think you realize that he is the Mitch Daniels in this race, and I think that Hoosier Republicans are going to rally around him on May 3rd because of that.
The road for him from this point out, though, is not it's not the easiest one for him to possibly get there. What does he have to do?
Well, we're going to have to be competitive at the convention. Again, we're going to have to continue to campaign in the primaries, continue to rack up delegates, and we're going to have an open convention. It's going to be very difficult for Mr. Trump to get to the 1237 that he needs. Even more difficult for Senator Cruz. So we're planning on an open convention. We've started to put together a world-class political floor team together, convention floor team. Names most Hoosiers may not recognize, but gentlemen like Charlie Black, Stu Spencer, Vin Weber. Stu Spencer was Reagan's floor man.
A lot of history in 76.
76 in Detroit. So so they've been down this road before, and we're looking forward to an open primary, or excuse me, an open convention.
What would the Kasich supporters say to the Trump supporters who claim if it gets to that point and Trump has, double the number of delegates of a Ted Cruz or a John Kasich at that point, that it's simply not fair to them?
10 times in history, Republicans have gone into a national convention where no one had a majority of delegates. 7 out of those 10 times, the person that ended up getting the nomination was not the person that went into the convention with the most delegates. In 1952, Senator Taft from Ohio had the most delegates going into the convention, more than Dwight D. Eisenhower. But the delegates at that convention chose Ike because they realized that he had the best chance to win in November. And I think that the delegates in July in Cleveland at the Republican National Convention are going to choose Governor John Kasich because they realize that he has the best chance of beating Hillary Clinton this November.
And our thanks to John Williams. Now, all the attention could lead to enormous turnout, similar to what we saw 8 years ago when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton roared through the Hoosier state, hoping to claim the Democratic Party's nomination then. It also leads to the question, will Indiana be ready for massive waves of voters? Our Katie Hines is with Secretary of State Connie Lawson.
What role will Indiana play in this year's primary election?
Well, our primary is on May the 3rd, and so obviously, you know, there are presidential candidates who have not met their delegate requirement, and there are 16 states between now and May 3rd when we have our primary. It's very possible we could be the deciding factor of, obviously we're not going to know until the time gets here, but I think Indiana can play an important role.
Are you expecting greater turnout as a result?
I really think so. You know, historically, we turn out about 20% in the primary, but as I've always said about everything, it's the candidates and issues that drive the voters out to the polls. So Indiana had a historic turnout for the primary in 2008. We turned out 40%. In the general election of 2008, that was historic as well, and we turned out in the mid to high 60% in 2008. So I think we're going to see that again.
And given that, how is your office preparing?
We're doing a lot of things, actually. Obviously, after candidate filing, we certified the ballots to the county clerks. And I would mention that all the military ballots have to be mailed as of this Saturday, so we're working with the clerks and the Department of Justice to make sure that those ballots are mailed. The other thing we're doing is we're testing the statewide voter registration system. You know, we are expecting unprecedented volume requests of reports and absentee ballots and, you know, people coming in to register to vote and voting early. And so we've been testing. We've got 2 backup sites, one in Houston, Texas, one in Culpeper, Virginia. We're testing the volume capacity of that backup system to make sure it stays solid and stable on, you know, during that whole 30 days prior to the election and on election day. The other thing we did just this morning is that we met to prepare in case we have a recount of any of the races that my office is responsible for. So I chair the recount commission. There's a Republican and Democrat commission member as well. And then we have a director of the recount commission. So we're just we talked this morning about making sure we had the contact information for the state police in case we needed to impound, you know, voting equipment or voting records, meeting with the State Board of Accounts so that they know what election law has been changed and that we can get our recount booklet, you know, certified and ready to go. So there are lots of election preparation things that my office does that are kind of behind the scenes, but they're important and they may not be noticed if something if everything goes well, but if something goes wrong, obviously it will be noticed.
Our thanks to you both. We're going to talk much more about the Indiana primary. Plus, President Barack Obama has made his choice to fill the vacant Supreme Court seat, but will his nomination go anywhere? Our political insider standing by next on Indianapolis This Week, only on RTV6.
And get action today.
And welcome back to Indianapolis This Week, where the stage is now fully set for a Senate showdown over the future of the Supreme Court. President Barack Obama this week naming Merrick Garland as his choice to take the seat that had been held for so long by Justice Antonin Scalia. By now, you have likely heard his credentials, including serving on the D.C. Circuit for the Federal Court of Appeals. We're joined now by ABC News contributor Kate Shaw, who covers the Supreme Court and is also a professor at Cardozo Law School. Where does Judge Garland fall on the judicial and political spectrum? I know in some regards of the law, they viewed him partially as a bit of a centrist.
I think that's accurate. I think that he is quite moderate. He spent most of his career in law enforcement, so I don't think he's going to be, say, a liberal counterpart to Justice Scalia on a lot of issues. I think that he would be sort of on the center left of the Supreme Court. I think that there were other people on various short lists that probably would have been more progressive on a number of issues. But I do think that the president and his team really wanted to focus on the best candidate who had a chance at confirmation, and I think that they decided that Judge Garland was that candidate.
Republican lawmakers, though, Republican leaders have been so opposed to this nomination for weeks and months now leading up to this point. Is there a chance that they soften over the weeks and months ahead?
You know, I think that the White House is banking on it being more difficult to maintain this united front of opposition to a candidate once you have an actual person in front of you and someone who is as well respected, I think, on both sides of the aisle as Merrick Garland. I think he has very strong relationships with both Democrats and Republicans, you know, sterling credentials. The president said that Merrick Garland himself had come up in a number of conversations with GOP lawmakers. So the president has reached out with each Supreme Court vacancy. He's reached out. He's tried to talk to senators. and he said that the name he heard again and again in those conversations was Merrick Garland. So I think that they're hoping that when he's in front of them, it's going to be more difficult for this sort of general kind of obstructionist stance.
Kate Shaw from ABC News, thank you so much for joining us here this morning.
My pleasure.
And you can see my full interview with Kate Shaw by going to Facebook and liking our brand new Indianapolis This Week Facebook page. Now, Indiana Senator Dan Coats is among the Republicans saying that there should be no Senate vote and it will fundamentally alter the Supreme Court's direction for generations. He goes on to say the right thing to do is to give the American people a voice in the selection of their next Supreme Court justice. While some have argued that the voters spoke by electing President Obama in 2012, voters more recently chose a Republican Senate in 2014. Now, Democrat Joe Donnelly pushing for Senate hearings, no surprise, saying we were elected as senators to do a job for our nation, and that job includes considering, debating, and voting on nominees to the Supreme Court. He also echoes a line we are seeing all over social media right now: we should do the job we were elected to do. And we want to welcome in our political insiders this morning. Mary Beth Schneider, of course, Democrat Kip Tu, and Republican Marcus Barlow. And Marcus, let's start with you. Are Republicans fighting a losing battle right now?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that, there's no, it's not surprising that we saw all the presidential candidates saying, we should delay. We should let the American people decide.
On the Republican side.
On the Republican side, saying we should let the American people decide who the president's going to be. I don't think they were doing that because they weren't listening to their base, because they weren't listening to their voters. I think Republican voters right now are very skeptical about what would happen with an Obama nominee to the Supreme Court.
Can the Democrats put pressure on them, Kip?
Yeah, and I think Democrats should. I think it's one more piece of evidence of the outrageous behavior of Republicans with this president.
They'll argue that Democrats have done it.
They shut down the government. Let me make my point. They shut down the government twice. And now they are stopping the Supreme Court from being able to have a full Supreme Court. And the hypocrisy comes right down to Senator Coats. You look at Governor right now has an appointment here in Indiana. He's running for re-election. We haven't heard a single person on the Democratic or Republican side in the state say he should not be able to appoint that person to the Indiana Supreme Court. And yet Dan Coats outrageously says we should wait until the election for the next president to pick the Supreme Court justice. Everybody knows what the Constitution says, and they're ignoring the Constitution.
And this is unprecedented. Democrats have not done this in the past. We saw Robert Bork, that'll get brought up all the time, but he was defeated in a vote on the Senate floor. It went out of committee with the no vote. They sent it to the full floor anyway, and it was rejected on the merits of what his positions were. We've also seen a nominee actually make it in Ronald Reagan's final term, was confirmed in his final year. So it has not happened since, I don't think, since around the Civil War in the 1800s. This is completely changing the dynamic of how nominees to the Supreme Court will be picked. And I don't think it should be about Republicans or Democrats. I really think it should be about everybody just doing their job and following forward and not waiting till an election to decide everything. We need a functioning government now.
A yes or no answer on this. Is Garland confirmed?
Probably not.
I don't think he will be.
No, I don't think so.
Let's move on to the presidential race. Well, we've got a couple minutes left here. Is Donald Trump the next GOP nominee after his strong showing on Tuesday?
I don't think so. I think, well, I don't want to make any predictions. I think any predictions that have been made have been completely proven false. But, it's important to remember that an overwhelming majority, well, 65% around there, of Republicans that have shown up to vote in the primary so far have not voted for Donald Trump. He hasn't garnered the plurality that he needs in order to go into the convention with a solid nomination already wrapped up. So we're more than likely going to have a brokered convention with a lot of delegates who came there, and there is a very strong anti-Trump sentiment that's been building throughout this primary. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't want to predict what's going to happen, but I think we are going to go into the convention not knowing who our nominee is.
How does the Republican Party change?
I'll make a prediction. My prediction is the Republican Party is broken, and it will not get fixed this year. It will not get fixed until they get humiliated at the polls in November, and then they'll start about fixing their party, but they have got the biggest problem I've seen for a political party in my lifetime, and it's right there staring them at the face, and the name is Donald Trump.
I hope Trump is not the nominee, but at this point I'm not sure how you can deny him without completely splitting the party in two.
But at the same time, Democrats are facing the same thing. The only difference is Republicans don't have...
I know you're supposed to do the talking points,
I know you guys are the party of the people, but Democrats have all of these superdelegates that just come in and decide your nominee no matter what people in the primary say.
Those superdelegates are making the process a whole lot easier for the Democrats.
Right, so let's not... I mean, we're comparing apples and oranges here. Bernie Sanders has made a lot of noise that Democrats didn't expect to make, saying a completely different message than what Hillary Clinton is saying. I think both parties are divided. Both parties are having a debate about their future.
I actually think Bernie has made Hillary Clinton a better candidate. I think the issues that Bernie has brought out in this campaign are good for this country. We have had too much wealth concentrated with the 1%. We have had Wall Street with too much control over our federal government. Those are the two things he's been harping on. I think that national conversation needed to occur, and I think he's played a vital role in our democracy.
Last note right there from Kip 2. Still to come, he's the man in charge of the Indiana State Police, and he's revealing new information about their fight against drugs across the state. It's a Sunday morning exclusive next. You're watching Indy This Week on RTV6. One with the state's top cop, State Police Superintendent Doug Carter, talking about the source of the state's drug problem and the anger against police in so many places. Rafael Sanchez with an RTV6 exclusive.
What is the state of policing?
It keeps me awake at night. I think 25 years ago we could have probably predicted this had we put the pieces and parts that were happening around the country together at the time. But I think over time, police agencies in America built a wall around themselves, in large part because of things that occurred in the early 1990s. And again, history repeated itself from the 50s and 60s. Now we're into the early 90s. Fast forward to incredible acts of violence around this country. And the incredible dislike and mistrust for law enforcement officers around this nation, from east to west, north to south. There are two things that need to happen. One, we need to tear that wall down, and we need to do everything that we can do in every community in Indiana and every community in America to encourage the trust of our citizenry. If we don't have their trust, they are not safe, period. Second thing is we have got to quit looking back. If we continue to look back into the past, expecting it to predict our future, we will lose, and we will kick this perpetual can down the road for our kids. I'm very passionate about this, and it's very, very important to me that we acknowledge the distrust. We acknowledge some mistakes in the past.
So how do we fix that?
We acknowledge that we're human beings. Okay. We acknowledge that people that criticize us, we're just like them. There is no perfect union, there's no perfect body, there's no perfect person on this planet Earth. We can't expect policemen to be, but what the community should expect is that we hold them accountable, and we do.
But you are the enforcers, you're not the legislators. So when it comes to things like heroin and meth, what more can we expect? What more can you do as a state police when you don't write the laws?
Yes.
All you can do is enforce the laws.
That's a great question, and I love the conversation because there's the drug problem facing Indiana right now, Raphael, is a three-legged bar stool.
And it's outrageous, right?
It's
heroin and meth, just completely outrageous.
And the number one most prescribed, or number one most abused drug in America is prescription drugs.
Right.
So that's one leg of the stool, the prescription drug. Generally speaking, there are a whole lot of people that become addicted to pain medication. And when they can't get that, what will they do? They'll go and buy heroin.
It's cheap.
And if they can't buy heroin, what will they do? They'll cook meth. I'm not suggesting everybody, but a very, very large percentage. Our lab has doubled its capacity since 2010 in regards to heroin analysis. So we know that heroin's everywhere. We know it's here. We have a pretty good idea where most of it's coming from. We have a pretty good idea now that, well, we know now that the truth...
Can you say, or is that under investigation?
Mexico.
Okay.
Mexico. We know that the vast majority of meth in Indiana now is Mexican meth. It's not produced in the backyards or in a barn or in a trunk or in a car or in a home. It's coming in bulk from outside of Indiana.
So how do we stop that?
We put forth the most aggressive law enforcement approach that we historically ever have, and we can't do it alone. The ISP can't do it alone. We have the same number of troopers today we had when I started in the early 1980s. But what we can do is put forth the most aggressive investigative principles to go after these people that are bringing these drugs to the state.
So have you shifted resources within the department to?
We're shifting our culture within the ISP. And
what does that mean?
It's called the All Crimes Policing Initiative. And what we've already started this. We've trained a couple hundred troopers now. The goal is to train 700 by the end of the year.
Is that you?
Yes, within Indiana, to give them the ability and the capacity to think differently than they ever have before. Whether they're responding to a domestic disturbance, whether they're in a home for a burglary, whether they're on a traffic stop, or whether they're at a local coffee shop and somebody comes up and gives them intelligence information. What do you do with that information? How do you respond to that information? What questions do you ask somebody that you're really not quite sure of? So we're expanding their ability to look narrowly at law enforcement the way they've always done business, and opening their eyes to the capacity and the capabilities that we know we have.
Unlike your local partners, state troopers don't carry what is known on the street as Narcan, the life-saving antidote for heroin overdoses. Can we expect at some point in the future for state troopers to use Narcan?
Absolutely. It's already coming. We've already trained the trainers. We've entered into a partnership with the Criminal Justice Institute, with the Attorney General's office. The Narcan's already here. So we've trained the trainers to go out into the field and train these troopers that are out there. It's a huge, huge benefit to them, and I'm looking forward to see what those results are. So to answer your question is yes, here very soon.
State Superintendent Doug Carter, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure being with you.
Come back again.
I will. Thank you. Anytime.
Our thanks to you both. State police expect to have troopers equipped with Narcan within the next 90 days. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. Presidential race and the primaries impact here on Indiana all week long right here on RTV6 and through our app. For Katie, Raphael, and our entire team, have a fantastic Sunday, everyone.